Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching our in-person exams tips workshop today. My name is Sormeh, and I'm here with my partner, Farmehr. Introduce yourself.
Hey folks, my name is Farmehr Asefzadeh. I'm also presenting the webinar today.
So we wanted to start off, Farmehr, can I get the next slide, please?
Sure.
We wanted to start off by introducing our club, which you should probably know by now because we're so famous. So Bright Future Dentist is a student-run predental organization that is dedicated to helping students on their path to dentistry. Through guest speakers, workshops, community service, field trips, and much more, we aim to equip students with the knowledge and insight into the field of dentistry and create a place for predental students to form friendships and network with each other. We just wanted to give a quick disclaimer before we start the presentation. Everything we're saying here is just our personal opinion and done based on our research and our opinion. So take it with a grain of salt. And hopefully these tips will help you in your future studies and your exams. And I hope you enjoy. So this is what we're going to be discussing today, basically. So we're going to start off by telling you what in-person exams are like. Giving you study tips, some pro tips that are completely secret and no one knows about them, only we know about them. No, I'm just kidding, everyone knows about them. They're pretty intuitive actually, but they're going to be throughout the whole presentation, so just keep an eye out for those. We're also going to be talking about how to take your exam, like different tips on how you should be doing your exam on the day. Also how to take away some lessons so you could do better next time you take your exam. And also how to deal with post-exam trauma. So how to deal with the time frame where you don't know your mark, but you really want to know your mark, and it's going to take a long time. So basically that's the presentation. Can I have the next slide, please? So what are in-person exams? So I wanted to start off by asking the audience what was their last experience with an in-person exam? Maybe, Farmehr, you could tell us what the last in-person exam you wrote was.
Oof, that was yeah, it's like 2 years ago at this point, and it was either virology or one of the psychology courses that I had. Yeah, it's been a long while.
How did it go? Do you remember?
Okay, it wasn't that bad.
Not bad.
It was good. It was good. I mean, it was a bit hectic. It was a bit stressful, but I think it went well.
Yeah, the last in-person exam I wrote was my DAT like a couple of months ago, like maybe October. It was October. And I remember being so nervous because I couldn't remember like how to move in an in-person area. It's like, Sormeh, don't look at anyone. They're gonna think you're cheating. It was just funny. But I feel like it's gonna be okay because once I got into the exam room, I kind of remembered everything. And like I felt at home, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't something strange. I still don't feel okay with online exams, but with that one, I felt really like everything was somehow in my head because I couldn't look at my notes, so I was just trusting myself. So it was actually a positive experience for me. But I don't know about everyone else. Anyways, we'll move on. So we're gonna give you some study tips, and we're gonna start with the next slide. So basically, why are you studying? Your goal is to get the highest grade possible, basically. I think that's everyone's goal, or the most learning. Well, there's two different things. There's learning and getting a high grade. So I really recommend you guys actually learn the content because in the near future, you're gonna need all this content again. But you're trying to get the best possible grade and the most amount of knowledge in your head based on how much time you have, like the remaining time until your exam, and your own capabilities. That's something about your own capabilities I really want to tell you is that everyone starts off on their own level. You can't compare yourself with your other friends because everyone is in their own league. So I want to give an example using video games. So basically think you're playing Call of Duty, or I don't know what the other one was called. I just asked someone else because I don't play video games. But imagine you're playing Call of Duty. You're on level 1. You've never played video games before. Then suddenly your brother or your sister who has been like on level 125, like a pro gamer or whatever, starts and like comes to play with you. and they beat you, obviously they're gonna beat you and to put you to shame and make so much fun of you. But you can't be comparing yourself to that person because they're on level 125. Just the fact that they've been playing for so long, it says something. And sorry, it's Halo. So yeah, the fact that they've been playing for so long, it already says something. They're already more experienced. They know how to play with the keyboard better, like everything. Not keyboard, the controller. Oh my God, I'm messing this up so badly. I'm trying to use an example I have no idea about. But basically, like, you can't be expecting yourself to be the same as everyone else. If you're just starting to study like a pro right now, like first year, then it's going to take you some time to catch up with those people that started studying in grade 11 or even prior to that, had more tutors, had more practice focusing and studying. It actually takes a lot of practice. And in order to get your goal, you probably need to make a schedule and to do your best. That's basically all you need to do. So let's have the next slide. Oh, that's the previous slide. Next one.
Oh, sorry about that. There we go.
So I'm gonna hand off to Farmehr for this one.
Right. So how to make a schedule? Well, it's a pretty straightforward process. For one thing, you need to actually have a calendar. Now, my personal preference, because I normally sit at my desk at home and I study and do pretty much most of the stuff that I do right here, is I normally print out like a paper calendar, a couple of paper calendars for all the months of study. And I kind of just stick it to the wall right in front of me. So in this case, you would want to print out a calendar for the month of April. And then you want to go through your exam schedule and write each of them down. So you would know, okay, this day is the first exam, then it's going to be this much amount of time until the next exam. I know it sounds a bit trivial, but it does come into it kind of gains importance, as I tell why. And I tell you why right now, because when you do that and you stick it right in front of you, you basically always have the dates in the back of your mind. You won't forget about them as you're going through, your day and whatnot. And you have to realize, your exams might not always be not evenly spaced out, but like reasonably spaced out. So for example, you might have 2 days, 3 days between one exam and the other. Sometimes not. And sometimes 2 exams might just fall on one day. And that means, that you have to prepare well in advance before you get to that day, so that the last, the first or the days before, like 2 days before the exam, you would just spend time reviewing what you've already know, not just studying. And I know that doesn't always happen. Sometimes something comes up and you have to kind of wing it, pull a couple of all-nighters, and well, God help you and me both in that case. But besides that, ideally you won't want to let that happen, and making a calendar helped me quite a lot compared to having something on my phone in making that happen. And then once you have everything down, another option is to have it on your iPad or your computer. If you spend a lot of time like going to different places and studying there, maybe make it like your wallpaper. It's not as appealing, but it's it works because it's going to be in front of you all the time. So what do you do when you've made your schedule? Well, you calculate the amount of time. Oh, I'm going to actually hand it to Sormeh. I'm going to say something and then I'm going to hand it to Sormeh.
Yeah, go
You
ahead.
need to essentially calculate the amount of time that it takes for each single exam. How much do you predict? And then once you have that, I would say multiply by 1.5, because normally it might take a bit longer, and stuff might come up. You might not, sit, every single day and study from like dusk till dawn or dawn till dusk. And so you need to have like a bit of leeway in that. And you have to, plan appropriately. Not every exam is going to take the same amount of time to study. But I'm going to say more about that later. I'm going to hand it to Sormeh for now.
Yeah. So basically, this is just in my calendar, and I was gonna show you guys an example of like what I do. I mean, probably doesn't look like Farmehr's because I saw it's on his wall, but because I'm always traveling, I'm never at home. Or like I'm never in the same place. I'm either in the lab or library or home or the car or someone's house somewhere. So I always need to have it on my iPad because I take my iPad everywhere I go. And if I lose this iPad, I will lose my sanity. Everything I have is on this iPad. And like the storage is always full, which is always like a problem for me. But anyways, so I wanted to talk about, so basically I put 2 questions up here. How much did you study for a specific subject during the year? And how difficult is the subject? Just it kind of relates to what Farmehr said. Based on how much you've studied previously for a certain subject, you should allocate a time to studying that subject, to studying that subject more. Oh my God, I can't speak. Based on how much you studied previously. For example, this year I've spent a lot of time and I've been really on top of my micro lectures, quizzes, everything, because it's just been my favorite course. So I know automatically that I don't need to allocate as much time like as other, for example, my virology course, because I'm struggling in that a little bit. Not that the content's hard, it's just the tests are a little bit more difficult than micro. Although like the contents are basically the same. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna neglect micro, say, oh, I'm gonna be so good at this and I don't need anything. I don't need any studying and just wing it. No, not at all, because I need to review those notes because I don't trust myself to remember what we learned in the beginning of the semester. Obviously, I have to spend time on that. Also, so I wrote down universal laws, but these are not actually universal laws. I just wrote this as to make it sound funny. But basically, they are true though, because you need at least a minimum of 3 days before the exam to study for that exam to get a decent mark. You can't be sitting the night before and trying to cram as much information in your head as possible, because as soon as you cram that information, you've spent very superficial amount of energy trying to read that information and absorb the information. That's immediately going to leave your head as soon as you go to sleep or the day of the exam, because you're so extremely nervous. I mean, at least that's true for me. Again, like it depends on everybody, but I feel like that's true for most people. That's probably you're gonna have so much stress that's literally gonna leave your head. So I really suggest at least 3 days. You need to have to like review the content. And based on how much time you have, you're gonna have to study differently, obviously. Like either you spend like the whole 3 days just studying for micro before the exam, or you have a week before where you're doing practice questions, doing textbook readings, watching YouTube videos, or you're gonna study even before that, maybe like throughout the semester, where you're continuously reviewing your notes, taking notes, learning other subjects, drawing connections, which we're gonna be talking about in the future. But it all depends on how much time you have and how much difficulty you have with the subject. Also, try to prioritize 3 tasks in a single day. For example, I'm gonna say this because my life has been so hectic right now. I can't, sometimes I prioritize going to the lab and studying for 2 subjects and also going to lecture and to work and to a meeting. That's really not gonna work out for you, because while you're in the lab, you're thinking about going to that meeting. Oh, I forgot the agenda for the meeting, I haven't read it. You're not gonna even understand what you did at the lab, probably gonna mess up. If you're gonna be studying, you're still gonna be thinking about the next thing. Oh yeah, the meeting, I still haven't read the agenda. You're gonna lose all your focus. Still doesn't work out. So you should like ideally prioritize 3 tasks, and that's what's worked for me, but it depends on you. Really find your own balance. And there's also the next thing I want to talk about is the 80-20 rule. You can't study everything. So the 80-20 rule basically says you can either put 20% of your energy into studying 80% of your study topics, or you can put 80% of your energy to studying 20% of your study topics. So you can see that if you put a lot of energy into studying a little bit of subjects, you're going to be really good at those subjects. But if you put a little bit of energy into studying a lot of subjects, you're going to be superficially good in all of them. Again, this depends on your mastery of the subject. For example, if I've studied micro throughout the semester and I remember it like midterm 2, I really had trouble with how the plasmid like is inserted into the bacteria, or like how the phospholipid, what am I saying? I really need to study. I can't think. I said I was good at it, but I really can't think. Peptidoglycan, there we go. Not phospholipid, the peptidoglycan layers like synthesized. Okay, I don't remember that. I'm gonna go and really focus on that and maybe like 5 other subjects. That's gonna be 20% of the semester. Really hone in on those and probably just superficially review the rest. Because like I was pretty sure of the other ones, but it depends on everyone. So yeah, but like this is how I've organized it. So first week I said I'm gonna chill but finish micro lectures. For the second week, I've numbered my weeks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For the second week, I'm gonna study micro because it's the week after that, which is this week. I'm studying for micro and finish my immuno and micro assignments. I have a bunch of lab reports to do, so I'm gonna finish those because it's the last week of courses. I'm also, for week 3, I'm gonna study for virology because virology is coming up after that week. And then week 4, I'm studying for physiology. Obviously, I think this semester I've had such a chill studying schedule, but doesn't always happen like this. Sometimes you have 3 midterms back to back and you have to really know how to prioritize that as well. So yeah, I'm done with that slide. We can move on.
Yeah, and I'll also say sometimes, if, because the exam schedules, the prof doesn't necessarily always have all the say in that. Sometimes, the slots are just kind of not randomly, but just kind of assigned by the registrar's office. And sometimes you might have 2 exams back to back. I actually had that last semester. It wasn't in-person exams, but it was still final exams. And in that case, having read for that subject, like even 7 days in advance, not like a week before that, just having read a lot of the material and then just kind of spending the one day you have refreshing helps a lot than just kind of just reading everything there. So it's important to always plan ahead. That's why I was kind of saying making the schedule is important so you could know in advance that might happen.
Also, middle of the thing pro tip, try not to study the day of the exam if you can. Unless it's at 7 p.m. Like obviously I'm gonna study in the morning, but like the few hours before, try not to study so your brain doesn't like explode.
Yeah. And actually that kind of brings us to this interesting looking graph. I mean, I think for the couple of psychology students that are watching, that's a Yerkes-Dodson law, Yerkes-Dodson graph. So what that says is that there's an optimal level of psychological arousal. If you get too stressed, your performance is going to be hindered. And if you're just fatigued, if you're not aroused enough, your performance is going to be hindered. And so that's why I have this point here. Spend longer time doing less work. Why? Because it keeps you right here. If you cram everything into 2 days, it really does depend on you. But in my own case, what I tend to see is that I will fall very easily right here, and I'll tend to procrastinate a lot because it basically serves, it's an anxiolytic thing to do. It tends to kind of bring this back here. And I mean, for a brief amount of time, you might just be at optimal arousal, but you're not actually going to be spending time doing anything to change your situation. And so it just kind of reverts back to here. And it's not going to be it's not going to be productive at all. And also you have to spend time doing practice questions and going over notes. This is very important for some subjects like chemistry, especially organic chemistry, and also math and physics and subjects like that, because knowing the material is like only 30% of it. I would say 70% of it is just actually doing the problem set that you have not over and over like one problem set, just doing new problem sets, because you have to get very efficient at doing questions the minute you see them. Otherwise, you're going to waste all your exam time on one question or a couple of questions. Prioritize the exam practice. So this isn't always possible. Certainly isn't possible for me at all times. But if possible, put your work-related, volunteering-related, extracurricular-related activities off just for the month of the final exams, because in this period, normally final exams are worth, I don't know, I would say 30 to 50% of the whole entire course, depending on the course structure. And I'm not going to say every single minute counts, so don't spend any time for your friends and family, but normally work-related extracurricular activities, they take a lot of time. It's not like just 1 hour or so every day. It's a lot of time. So you kind of you have to become very efficient in maximizing the amount of time you spend for studying, so you won't actually kind of come to a point where this happens. Again, spend longer time doing less work, less specific work, that is.
That one I put, yeah. Okay. So we're just gonna get going with some more study tips. But in the previous slide, I said also try to put a pause on hanging out with your friends and like your lovers, unless you are gonna study together. I know I'm personally not the best at this with everybody. Like for example, some friends, I'm definitely gonna get distracted with friends. But I know that me and my boyfriend always study together anyway, so it doesn't really like affect us. Yeah, but like if someone's gonna distract you and you're not gonna be focused when you're studying, then you might as well just not study. Like, what are you doing? Like, you wasting your time. But yeah, that's all I had to say. And then for the study tips, this is just some like general study tips. So yeah, again, with the time thing, try to space out your practice. So this is like basically how it works, like this kind of example. So like first you learn the material, then you revise and review for the next 2 days, and then you wait a week, and then you revise and review again, and then wait 2 weeks and revise and review again. But this is like for if you have a lot of time, like before the exam or like just throughout the year. And also another thing is like color code your notes when you're taking notes during the year. I know this works for a lot of people, but it doesn't really work for me. Personally, I just like to put illustrations and just like, all of my notes are colorful, but they're like specifically colored in a way that I'll be like, oh, okay, I wrote about glycolysis in purple in that page with that diagram there, kind of like visually remembering it. So, I mean, it depends on what works for you. We just like put everything in case you need it. Yeah, and don't color code everything, only the key information, because if you have like those red, if you find everything a key point, then that's not going to work. You can't just memorize the entire textbook or all of your notes. So you really need to highlight the most important information. And I know some people, you can look at TikTok too, like that's where I found this. But if you once you've done your highlighting, you can also make it into a condensed note, like a kind of a cheat sheet where you have all this important information. Like you just pretend that you're going to take this paper to the exam room and you just write down all the really key information in there. Yeah, and we can go to the next slide. I'm going to pass it off to Farmehr for this one.
Right, so a couple more study tips. These are actually, I'm going to say, meant for you to use in that time that you've dedicated to studying. One of them is called the square method. So basically what you do here is when you're reading through your book or when you're reading through your notes, you look at the headings of the book and you turn them into questions. So you don't just kind of read, okay, chapter 1, glycolysis, for example. You read chapter 1, what is glycolysis? And then you try to reread the contents that is under the heading in an attempt to answer that specific question. So you're essentially reading the text within the context that you're trying to answer the question that you posited to begin with. And that kind of makes it that you have like more of an active theme to your learning. And then that's the first 3 steps. You would have to recite. So you close the book and then take a break, come back, and then you recite. Okay, so what did I learn? What was glycolysis? Okay, so what I've learned is this. Oh, I forgot what glycolysis is. What is this, and this? And then you review what you don't remember. So let's say you forgot all of it, and then you have to go and relearn the entirety of glycolysis. But hopefully, if you didn't, it's just going to be a couple of small tips, and you're going to review what where you faltered. And there's also other ways of doing active recall. That was one. The Leitner system, that's incredibly useful for subjects like biochem, where you have to kind of memorize protein structures with their name and their polarity and everything. So you make Anki cards, and they basically, you kind of read one, and if you get it right, you put it like at the back. There, and I'm gonna kind of post something about this, about how that works, like a website. But basically, what you do is you kind of have a series of club cards. You read one, or say you kind of turn it around. You see the question. You try to answer. Like it says, what is the structure of histidine? What polarity is histidine? Then you kind of say, okay, it's this, and this. You turn it around, and if you got it correctly, I think you put it back so that you could get to it later. And if it's not, then you put it earlier so that you can get back to it and try to re-answer it. And then when you correct, you put it back, further for review. It's a more complete system than that, but that's kind of like a bit of a crude explanation for it.
But there's also an app for it, the Anki app. You could also use that where you just say like, oh, I'm really confident about this, I'm not, or something, and it just brings back the card around. But if you're doing it manually, that's what Farmehr is saying.
Yeah, actually the app's going to be easier. Not that I've, we're sponsored.
I'm more comfortable.
I've actually used the Anki app. I just know that it's very popular, and if you like flashcards and if you find that it's useful and you're learning that, you might want to consider that. Other things like mnemonics, for example, I'm trying to think of a good one. You
All right,
know,
we have to hurry up a bit though. We're at 35 minutes already.
oh my. Well, mnemonics basically you kind of take something that's a bit harder to remember, and you turn it into something that's easier to remember. Mnemonics for it, for example. I don't know. I don't remember any of
Like,
the
you know,
mnemonics.
like how the oxidation and reduction.
Oh, red cat.
Yeah, like that's like
Reduction.
mnemonics. That's an example. Or like the planets. I don't remember the planets one, but like I used to remember it a lot. My mother or something. I don't know. Something.
Yeah. Well, you get the gist of it. That's
Yeah.
basically what mnemonics said. Method of loci. Any of you who've watched, I don't know, Sherlock on I don't know, Netflix or Prime, it's like, he does this, and it's basically what it is you attach, kind of create sort of a place that what you call the mind palace, and you basically kind of attach something that you want to remember to different parts of the environment. So I guess, for example, if you want to remember the Krebs cycle, you could somehow relate the first step to your door, and then you open that and you kind of walk into place and you kind of remember the next step. Um, but it's basically you're associating something you want to remember with spaces, locations, because it makes it easier to recall, apparently. Self-referencing is when you relate something to your own life. Like, for example, if you're learning about anatomy or physiology, you kind of think, well, this is how my arm works when I do this. And if it breaks, this is what bone
That's what it
breaks.
looks like.
This is what will look like. This is what bone will break. So
Yeah.
that's self-referencing. You can do mini tests. And this is very important. Do mini tests because it tells you what you understood and what you didn't understand about a chapter. And later, instead of coming and reading the whole chapter all over again, you can just kind of go and review mostly what you didn't know. And then we have the Feynman learning technique. Basically, the gist of it is read extensively about a topic so that you can actually easily explain it to a 12-year-old. Now, I would say this is a bit, it might not always kind of work when you're trying to study again for grades because it might cause overlearning. Remember how Sormeh said 80-20 rule? You can spend 80% of your energy kind of learning 20% of the subjects perfectly, like better than the prof, but then it's not going to be tested on all that detail. So know when you're, again, you have a limited amount of time and spend your energy learning what is going to be covered in the exam. Obviously, you need to understand the subject, but put most of your energy studying what's going to be covered in the exam. But when you understand just that, well, you should be able to kind of explain it to anyone at any language level. That's a good indication that you've understood something deeply. And if you can't simplify, you know that you might need to go and read more about it sometimes. We now have, I'm going to hand it off to Sormeh again.
I swear this is the last slide about these tips.
Yeah.
So
But you're
basically,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, we like accumulated everything we could. So basically the joint connections is basically you just okay, so it's the same thing as I said before, kind of like with the coloring thing, but you kind of remember the layout of the page and like where everything was written. And this is called like contextual learning. You like relate the writing to a graph that you see. Like basically that's what I do. Like I've written this note in a certain color that relates to like a diagram, and that's how I remember it in my head. And drawing your understanding is more for like abstract concepts. So you basically try to like draw out, or you don't need to draw out, like write out what you understand in like kind of like a cloud to like see how everything relates to each other. And then you can compare that to a book, your reference book or textbook, to see if your understanding was correct or not and just make adjustments. The last one from mind maps is basically I use it a lot for biology courses. It's very similar. You just start off from one concept and start branching off into more specific concepts, just so you can kind of organize your thoughts and organize what you've learned into like a more visual, into something more visual, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we actually took this from the DIY university workshop, and we kind of adjusted a bit because it's important for you to know how to study for different courses. So for example, for biology, we talked about how doing practice questions, doing multiple choice and short answer practice questions from the learning objectives and previous exams if the prof is okay with you, because a lot of times that might be considered plagiarism if you go and dig out previous exams. So make sure the professor is okay with you using previous exams, but then doing those can actually give you a pretty good idea of what the questions will be like, and you can apply your knowledge. Make connections. So we're going to talk, Sormeh just talked about this right now. And when you make connections between subjects, it basically makes it sediment. It makes your it sediments your understanding. So it makes your understanding get a lot more bold. My English is not working well today. Sorry about that, but you get the gist. Yeah, you can use Crash Course, Bosman Science,
These are just like my
Soul
favorite.
Biology.
These are my favorite YouTubers. I swear, I live by them. I love their videos. I don't know about everyone, but the newest one I've started watching is MIT lectures. Like I just watch
That's really good.
lectures at night.
That's really good. There's also, you know, the classics like Khan Academy. There we go. And you can use all of these to kind of make your understanding. But after you've learned what the the professor expects you to know, these can actually kind of complement your understanding. And also in some courses like cell biology, molecular biology, it's important to draw diagrams, cell structure, pathways, and then you actively recall them. Someone knows a lot more about this. I should have explained it for microbiology. And it's important to use these methods for cell biology and molecular, because there's a lot you need to just understand, a lot of details. And they're all about transport and pathway and mechanisms, and kind of sketching them out and kind of visualizing going through the entire pathway in your head. It really helps.
You know what I've done for cell biology, especially because I know a lot of people struggle with that. I cannot talk about biochem because biochem was just not my course. I really couldn't. I think I have a lot of trouble using like flashcard methods to memorize things, and it was very like fact-based, so it was difficult for me. But for cell biology, it was more concept and like mechanism based, so it really stuck with me. So what I would do is, for example, I would draw like the RAS MAP kinase pathway, and that's related to how like bacteria move. So I would draw that on the side, then I would look at them, be like, oh, what part of these align? I would like bring them closer together, relate them, go do more research about like how this is related, or like evolutionary important, things like that. So then it kind of just becomes like, I become a master at it in a way, not a master at it, but like, you know, to my own level. It's a bit like risky because it was really overlearning, but I spent a lot of like time prior to the exam. But obviously it really helps because the questions that, for example, my professor asked were really like short answer questions, and relating like the concepts together was exactly what I was expecting. So he related the RAS MAP kinase pathway to how something moves. Like if this part of the pathway fails, how is the movement gonna change? Is it gonna move towards it? Is it not gonna move towards it? They're not gonna ask literally fact questions. They're gonna ask something with a twist to it. So you should also, when you're studying it, think, oh, like what is this pathway? And like kind of like actively think about it. Like, oh, this is such an important pathway because this one thing, if it fails, it's gonna cancel everything else. So you kind of like take note of that, and you kind of try to remember it in the side of your head. That's how you kind of like do it. But for memorization stuff, I have no
memorization stuff. Like for example, well, anatomy would technically, or animal biology. You know, animal biology, there's a lot of parts of it where you have to kind of know mechanisms and pathways, but most of it is like memorization. You know, what is this part of a squid? What is this part of the sponge? What is the throat called? I don't know, in a fruit fly. I don't know, something like that.
throat of a flute.
What is the
I would
throat? What
never.
is the pharynx of a fruit fly called? So I don't know, something of that nature. And you need to kind of, this is more where, you know, repetitive active rehearsal is very important. Or virology. Well, virology is a combination of cell biology and memorization and a bit of like, so it's a bit of a combination thing. You need to use a lot of these things, but anatomy courses mostly kind of fall into memorization based biology courses. And also make sure to review lab material, because a lot of times the prof will not only say this, but they will bring questions from labs, especially if they kind of explicitly state that. I know for micro, I think Professor Nivolite does that. But yeah, make sure to review the lab materials as well on that.
I put that for all the slides. I mean, we don't need to reiterate, but review your lab materials, guys. They'll
Yeah.
trick you.
Also, here's the thing. Math, chemistry, and physics. You do everything we just talked about in biology so you can understand the subject, and then you practice. You practice until you can't practice anymore, right? And then you practice a bit more. And the reason for that is because when you get a question, it's all application. You learn, for example, how to do, I don't know, hydroboration in chemistry. But then if you have to sit there and think, this looks like a molecule that you can do hydroboration on. I wonder how hydroboration was done. Like that. So if you do that, that's going to be like, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes for one molecule or for one pathway in organic chem, for example. And that's going to sap a lot of your time, and you'll not have time for all the questions. So you need to do it like this. You have to get to a point where you see the molecule, and then you just not automatically, but you kind of write the pathway about it in like,
It becomes
less
so
than
familiar to you.
it needs to become and the same can go for physics, the same can go for math. The only way you can get good at these is practice. Actually, you remember I had a Gen Chem prof first year for ISI, and he said the best way you can study for the course is not to go through the material necessarily, is to go to the end of the textbook and just do the questions. And you know what? When I did that once and it worked, it really did work. I mean, it didn't get me 100, but it got me like 85.
Another thing is, guys, really you shouldn't lazily study. What I mean is, like, when you're doing practice questions, don't immediately try to go to the back of the textbook and look at the answer.
Oh yeah.
Don't look at the answer at all. You need to really struggle. And I heard this from Dr. Hoveg, and it's really important. Like, if you don't struggle with it, your brain is not gonna, like, you kind of need to be starved for that information in order to form a neural pathway for it. If you just be like, oh, okay, so I don't know, I don't know what this is, and just go to the back of the textbook, you just like ruin everything for yourself. Try to go to the textbook in the front where they're teaching you, try to figure out yourself. And then after you've done it and given it a really good shot, then go to the back of the textbook and check your answer. Don't look at the mechanism of how it's done. And like,
Exactly.
that's like something I really highly recommend you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, don't forget your, like, I know sometimes you do some questions in the beginning of the year and you're like, yeah, those were easy, I'm not going to do them again. Please do them again.
Please, yeah.
I've done that before, and there was literally a question right from the textbook on my final exam, and I remember doing it, and then I forgot how to do it right on the exam. I was like, wow, this is really terrible. I should have really studied for that. But really just look at everything again.
Yeah, and sometimes if you do that enough, you get, combination questions you've never seen, but because you've been, well versed in doing whatever organic chemistry or whatnot, you will be able to kind of find an innovative way. When you've practiced enough, you will find an innovative way of sometimes solving the question. In math, for example, I've had that, not chemistry necessarily, but for math, I know that works. And also for psychology, it's very similar to studying for biology. You need to study everything that you're provided with. Textbooks are incredibly important to study for psychology. The profs normally kind of combine material from both their text and the notes that they provide in the tests that they give. And mostly for most of the psychology courses I've taken, it's going to be a combination of short answer questions and multiple choice. And if you read the articles, lectures, and notes, you'll be good. However, when you come to final exams, you need to realize that this sometimes it's like just kind of chunked up. Midterm 1 is this to this, and then it's not ever going to be covered again. Midterm 2 is this. Midterm 3 is technically the final exam, and it's just going to be like the final 4 chapters. But if that doesn't happen, and it's like everything, you need to kind of spend a good amount of time reviewing everything, especially the figures, and also, like, for example, concepts and trends. For example, let's say they ask you, at what age does depression, or I don't know, like at what age does schizophrenia happen in whatever humans? And you'll have to kind of remember and then they'll give you 8 to 12, 15 to 20, 21 to 25, 25 to 30, and then it's not even like a broad range. It's like very specific times, and you need to kind of know. And maybe these are just kind of arbitrary examples, so don't hold me to this. It might be like 40. So, but it's as an example that you need to know that.
And also for the psychology textbook, I know like sometimes I would have a lot of trouble with one chapter, or after doing one midterm, I'll be like, wow, okay, I reviewed the questions. I really did bad on like, I don't know, big five personality traits. Maybe I should go back and read the chapter again. Sometimes when I reread the chapter and I compare it to my notes, I'm like, what did I even write? Like this makes no sense in my notes. Why did I write them all wrong? And I just like fix it. Sometimes you just like misunderstand. Maybe I was tired or something, but you should always like try to go back to the parts where you had trouble and to see where you went wrong.
Exactly.
Um,
Now we come to some pro tips where Sormeh, these
okay.
are Sormeh's super secret pro tips.
Yeah, my super secret life hacks pro tips. So we
Yeah.
could go to the next slide. So guys, I think, are you ready? Are you ready for your mind to be blown? So basically, I mean, like these are not crazy, but basically I was going to talk about how exercise and your diet really affects your performance during exams. So you you don't need to tell me. I hate exercising. Like I know no one wants to do it. No, I saw people want to do it. It's just I don't want to do it. But really, it really makes a big difference in your life. Even if you go for like a 30-minute workout, just really light, even like 2 times a week, 1 time a week, anything you can do, it's gonna make a dramatic difference in your performance. Your brain's just gonna be like alive. What can I say? Like it's just the blood and the nutrients are flowing to your brain, and it's gonna make a huge impact in your life and how you perform on exams. Again, with like eating habits, if you start to eat junk food and your body's not getting nutrients, your brain's not getting nutrients, or you're on a strict diet where you're not eating any carbohydrates or sugars, that's really going to deprive your brain of the nutrients it needs to like be energized and actively learn, especially during exams and at our level, especially in upper years when you're really like, there's a lot of information for your brain to grab onto. So eating good and exercising ensures that you're always, not always, but for you're more energetic for a longer time, and you during the time you're studying you're absorbing more information, or you're holding on to more information. And I know we're all undergraduate students, and again, if you're socializing or drinking alcohol or using any other kind of substance, probably leave it for the duration of the exam, because it's really going to hinder how much you can retain and just kind of make you distracted and not focus as much. Yeah, and like the foods that I recommended were nuts, cottage cheese, figs, dried fruits, oatmeals, egg, and yogurt. These are pretty good, but just anything you make at home is better than getting junk food from outside. But obviously, I understand if you can't. We can go to the next slide, Farmehr.
Oh, wait a second. Oh, that's interesting.
It's stuck.
There we go. So before actually, I'm going to say something else. Probably exam season is not the best time for you to start any sort of low carbohydrate or ketogenic
Yeah.
diet. I know that, a lot of people say, well, no, in theory, your body can make ketone bodies, but those ketone bodies are like trying to adapt your car to run on coal. You can't technically do it, or like to run on, I don't know, absinthe. You can technically do it, but you just don't want to do that because it's not going to run smoothly.
In the
Now's not
beginning, anyways, like you shouldn't try like anything crazy right at exam time. Your body's gonna be thrown off. You're gonna be exhausted for no reason. You're gonna be like, oh my God, I have to take a nap every 5 minutes. It's not gonna work out.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the second slide. It's about taking down the stress. So I think everyone can relate that exam time is very stressful. I don't think that's any new information. There's something that I recommend you guys do. So you want to get your exercise in, right? So you could walk and meditate at the same time. And basically walking meditation is when you walk and you're just focusing on the fact that you're walking, like your footsteps, the air, like breathing, the smells around you, the sounds around you. Don't even listen to music, just walk. Just observe people. Like think about anything but yourself. It's like watching a movie, but in real life. You know what I mean? When you're watching a movie, you don't think, you're just like, oh, their life. I am them right now. Same thing with walking meditation. You're kind of just detaching from yourself, and in a more healthy way than watching television. and it's just relaxing for the couple minutes. Another thing is make tea, not war. So I really recommend that if life gives you lemons, you should make lemon tea, which like you don't have to make lemon tea, but it's been apparently proven to be boosting your immunity, your concentration, and helps with digestion. And I know hot girls have stomach problems, so you need to drink that lemon tea, because every time I get stressed, I know I have a lot of stomach issues, so it helps. And that's why I also suggest substituting tea for coffee, especially during exam time. I substitute tea for coffee a month before exam time. The level of stress that I'm experiencing at the third year level is uncontrollable. So I'm just like, no coffee, no caffeine. I mean, not no caffeine, because tea has caffeine, but like a lot reduced. And especially if you're drinking a lot of coffee, you're going to be all jittery and stressed, and it's going to decrease your focus. Also, another last thing is sleep it off. If you're starting to feel really foggy and you're tired and you've studied for such a long time, I don't fight the nap. If the nap wants it, just let the nap happen. Like if you have the time, you should really take a nap for like 1 hour. I wouldn't recommend 2 hours, because then you get groggy, but just nap for 1 hour or 20 minutes. Then when you wake up, you can start fresh and study more. Sometimes if you don't have the time, you can just change your study focus. So you're studying something like chemistry, you can go to another subject that's really different, so it's not technical, like psychology. So then your brain can, part of your brain can take a break, and you can start afresh with a new subject.
Actually, I kind of wanted to attest to what Sormeh said, and I understand sometimes coffee, it has a great aroma, and every time I tell myself, yeah, I'm gonna, stave off coffee, and I go and smell that just smell of coffee, it's enough to make me kind of pour myself a cup, then two, then five. And so it's important for you not go down that route. It's because remember that Yerk-Dawson curve, or U curve that I showed you. That coffee, it basically puts you a bit further to the right, or it prevents you from kind of calming down. And because it increases, norepinephrine in your brain, and it just spikes your cortisol and all that, it does make you a lot more stressed. And if you're already a very stressy person, it puts you into distress, and you go everywhere jittery. So be very careful with that. And I'm going to actually talk about that in the last slide as well.
Okay, this is my productive studying tips. Another thing is to change your scenery. This is really important for me, because I get so bored at studying at the same place. I get this, especially my bedroom, I start getting bored, and I see my bed, it's like, oh, I should take a nap, another nap, another nap. That's not good. So if you're ever feeling like you're really bored and done with studying, just try to go to a coffee shop or go to a library. Even if you aren't being the most productive, I would say that's me in a coffee shop, at least you're doing something. I usually do that for any club work that I have, or assignments that I have to do. And it kind of, it's noisy and people are walking around, so you get to enjoy the scenery and also do your work. Another thing with coffee, it's a double-edged sword, right? So research suggests that some amount of coffee, in 1 cup of coffee, is enough to boost your attention and alertness and helps you study better. But if you drink too much, obviously you're going to be stressed and jittery and go around yelling at everyone like I do. But yeah. And also another thing that I really recommend, and it actually worked for me. You kind of hack your brain by putting a smell in your room that makes you, every time you put it on, then you think of, oh, I should study. I feel so productive right now. It literally worked for me. I haven't done it in a while, but as soon as I saw this fact, I'm like, why am I not doing this? I used to put lavender and specifically jasmine in my bedroom as an essential oil, those fumes. I don't know what they're called, humidifier. And it actually, every time I put it on, I'm like, oh, I should study. I really need to study. And then I go back to studying. And it was just actually really interesting how that happened. Or when Farmehr says he smells coffee, I guess he's just he wants to smell the coffee and drink the coffee while he's studying. It's kind of something you get habitualized to.
Yeah, but just be careful not to go overboard.
Don't drink coffee. Don't get used to that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Now we come to actually taking the exam, what you can do. And actually, I would say that even if sometimes you come across unideal situation, don't talk yourself into thinking, oh, well, it's lost, I'm gonna not do well on the exam. I'm actually gonna come to the slides itself. These are tips. It's gonna help with when you're trying to take the exam. But remember, 80% of your exam preparation, or sorry, 90% of your exam preparation is gonna come from your studying. That extra 10% is okay. Well, like for example, is the classroom you're in noisy? Or if it's not, is the TA walking up and down the stairs with a couple of tap dancing shoes, or if they actually worn like sneakers and you can't hear them walking up and down. Is there any construction going on anywhere near this? Your university being being demolished nearby in any way? And so all of these kind of might kind of tie in, but there's ways you can kind of counteract that. One suggestion I haven't actually included here is to have a couple of earbuds. I have a bunch of them here because I take them with myself everywhere I go. And it's for that very same reason, because I'm actually a bit sensitive to noise. But when I put those in, it kind of blocks a good chunk of the noise and I can actually focus a bit better. That's the first tip. Second tip, do not drink coffee before you start your exam. I understand that you might be tired and you might have not had enough sleep, but if you drink coffee and you kind of overdo it a small bit, according to that York stops, and you're going to become distressed. And the last thing you want is to be jittery while trying to answer a question, all scribbling all around the paper. And right. So it's important for you to kind of keep yourself optimally mentally aroused throughout the exam. And also, here's another tip. Try chewing the same flavor gum when you're studying and also when you're trying to answer the questions. It's been actually shown that it can increase your recall by about 25%. And there's actually, I think, the same mechanism through which if you listen to music when you're studying, you can do better if you're listening to music when doing the exam. Though I don't suggest, because you can't bring music with yourself to the exam, so don't do that. But chewing gum, you can do that. And actually, it's been shown to be effective as well. Don't think it's going to make a difference between getting 50 and 100, but it could help you with recall. And then we come to exam strategies. So it is inevitable that sometimes in some exams you'll come across a question where at that time you might not know the answer to, or it might be too long to answer. It is important for you at that time to kind of move on to the next question. And this, I know it's simple and you probably know about this, but it's important for you to actually practice this when you're not in the exam. So you will actually be kind of comfortable with doing it when you're actually taking the exam. You won't panic. And the reason is because when you do that, you'll answer all the questions that you know are correct, that you have a pretty good idea of how to answer. But then you'll have whatever time you have left, you can spend on first doing the questions that are a bit longer and you've just kind of left with the end. And then spending whatever time you have left on the questions that you don't know for sure, right? And trying to figure them out. And don't leave them blank. I mean, they don't have negative points. So try to answer something. You'll be surprised. Sometimes, you're not sure about it because you're stressed, but it might just happen to be the correct answer for a given question. So that's one thing. And also have a bit of an idea as to how much time you have for each question. So if it's multiple choice, then if you have, for example, 50 multiple choice questions and you have, 100 minutes to do the exam, you'll have on average 2 minutes for each question. Now, obviously, if you have a mix of questions, like for example, you have short answer and multiple choice and fill in the blanks, then you have to kind of partition a bit differently. So you might have 1 minute for multiple choice, 3 minutes for each short answer, something of that nature, but have a bit of an idea of how much you have for each question and then try to allocate close to that time. So if you see that you're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds and you still haven't gotten an answer to the question, move on. Or if you can actually tell that you can't get the answer right now, just move on and then focus on that question later. This way you can actually answer a lot of the questions that you know and get the marks for that. And then you can just they're not bonus marks, but you can spend whatever time you have to try to figure out whatever question it is that you don't know at the time.
Can I also give some tips before we move on to the thing?
Yeah, sure.
Basically, I just want to say that when you're going to the exam, I know a lot of my friends are actually fully panicking, nauseous, have to go to the bathroom constantly. And they're just super stressed about it. And I never get this stressed about exams just because my dad actually told me this one lesson. Because like this is just one exam from a million exams that you have to write because you're on this path of taking exams. You don't need to kill yourself over one exam and get so stressed, because obviously those stress hormones are going to put a strain on your heart, your brain, your entire body. It's really not worth it. If you haven't studied, you could have just studied, right? There's no use to just being stressed about it right now, because you're just going to hinder your health. Just think about it that way. Then you just go in calmly, which is going to boost your performance. Just think about it logically. You're going to be calm so you can use your brain, and you've tried your best to study. You need to have that trust with yourself so you don't feel that crazy nervousness and that pressure, because there is no pressure. It's just one exam. If you mess it up, it's not the end of the world. What are you going to do about it? Like, what is your stress going to do about it? Nothing. So just calm down, go in, do your best. Don't think about it after, because that also causes more stress. Then just wait for the mark. If the mark is bad, then you can stress about it. You don't even need to stress about it. You just think, okay, what should I do about it now? I got a bad mark. I could retake the course. I don't need to retake the course because the rest of my grades were fine. Kind of like sucks that I got a bad grade, but really you should just take away a lesson from this, which is our next slide. So basically, I'm talking about metacognition and discovering your own learning style. Metacognition is basically thinking about how you're thinking. So basically, how this works is that like you have to reflect on how your performance was during the exam. Were you super stressed? Did you go to the exam and suddenly forget about a subject, like me on my DAT where I forgot all about chemistry? Why did you forget about chemistry? What happened that led you to forget about chemistry? You should think about all these stuff. Then try to fix those bad patterns of thought. For example, try to fix coming into the exam completely panicked, because obviously that's going to boost your performance. Or think about what you already knew and what you didn't know, exactly like what I said. Like, why did I forget chemistry? Is it because I studied for it last minute? Is that why? Because I thought I would do so good on it, and then I didn't study it as much, and I went into the exam thinking I would probably forget about chemistry, and then I actually forgetting. Maybe that's why. Maybe you should fix that. And also, what have you missed? Did you miss a lot of the multiple choice questions? This is probably for after you get your exam back. Did you forget a lot of the, like, not forget, but did you miss the marks for the multiple choice? Did you miss the marks for the short answers? And what does that say about what you're doing to study? So you should just maybe focus more on doing practice tests for multiple choice, which is my problem, or focusing on being a better reader, because that's probably the problem when you can't answer multiple choice, because you're not really focusing on exactly what they're asking you or what the options are saying. If you are having a lot of time answering short answer, it's probably because you just haven't grasped the concept fully, or you are missing things in your explanation. You probably worded it badly, or you've over-explained, where just like barfed out a bunch of information and it's unclear if you know or you don't know. You have to say, like, in the beginning of the question, I know this is how it works. Basically, if you want the mark, you have to say the answer is this. Then go into your explanation if you want to go into the explanation. But don't not say this is the answer, because then they'll think you don't know the answer and you're just barfing up words. And then for discovering your learning style, basically from what your performance on the exam and how you studied for it before, and like other exams that you've taken and how you study for them, you can kind of hone in on what you are best at. For example, now I know I have to really focus on taking those notes, drawing those diagrams, spending time listening to YouTube videos after to really solidify those information for myself, talk about it with my other friends, and review all my assignments. The Anki cards don't work for me. They have never worked for me. I don't know how to make them work for me. And it's not a necessity. So I'm just going to stick to the things that work best for me. And you don't need to listen to anyone and saying anything on YouTube or any of your friends, because especially the YouTube ones are probably sponsored. So you don't need to change your learning style if it's already working for you. But if it's not working, maybe you do need to change it. That's left. Yeah. And last slide. Dealing with trauma.
Right. So this is just a very small set of tips that I have. After the exam, you're already, you could or could not be very stressed. depending on how the exam went or how much stress you have going into the exam. So my tip is don't stick around to talk about your answer with anyone. I know it sounds a bit odd because you want to kind of see how your friends did, you want to talk with your friends, but the best thing you can do is if you know you're going to kind of be in a situation where everyone's going to ask you, okay, how did you do on this question? How did you do on that question? Just kind of leave the area for that time, go and kind of have a coffee, go and relax, go and take a nap, and then kind of just come back and avoid talking about the exam until you have gotten the grade. And also avoid kind of checking your notes as well. It's a trap because all it's going to do is it's going to increase your post-test anxiety. You think, okay, I'm going to see if I did it correct, this question correctly or if it didn't. But at the end of the day, you might, if you didn't do the question correctly, it's just going to stress you until, you get your mark. And it might actually feed in to your study for your other exams. It's just going to ruin your day as well. So that's what I would say. Just don't fall into the trap of constantly checking your answers, kind of regurgitating, because you might not even remember the question correctly. And you might kind of blow out of proportion the answer you gave, especially if it's a short answer question. And you might kind of catastrophize and say, oh, I'll just get 0 for this and 0 for that and 0 for this. I'm going to fail the exam and this is my life. So, you're going to go down this downward spiral. At least in my case, that happened. And, that anxiety is going to kind of follow you into the next exam. So
do what Sormeh does. Just ignore the exam until the mark comes out.
Yeah, just kind of forget about it. It's done. Wait until the mark comes out and then continue to not I'm not saying don't care, just kind of continue to be calm about it, because it's not gonna, if you've studied for it and if you've done well. And also one more thing I can say, if the question, if the test went not so well and a lot of students didn't do as well on the test, the prof will more probably than not bell curve it up a bit, because the exams have to kind of meet a certain grade requirement. So if it's really, 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 really tanked and low, the prof will normally bell curve to kind of meet that grade requirement. And no, they don't bell curve it down. Like I know of one course that someone did in very long ago, but most, like almost none.
They're not going to.
Yeah, they're not going to do that, but they will bell curve it up.
Yeah. Another thing is, if you're already a smart student and you know that, and like it's been proven to you in previous exams and like tests, and you had a really hard test, like extremely difficult test, you should be actually happy about it, because probably you studied a lot for it, right? Those professors that put really hard tests, I heard this from a lot of people taking, what's it called? Neuroscience or something. It's a 4th-year course, but he put apparently 45 short answer questions in a very short amount of time. And obviously it's impossible to answer all of them. I don't think anyone, unless like they're the professor, could answer those 45 questions.
Also,
but he really wanted to
answer the questions.
He wanted to particularly gauge what everyone knows exactly. He didn't want anyone to get a mark they didn't deserve. And that's exactly like the perfect exam. Like, I feel like that I would love an exam like that, because it would be so fair. Unlike online exams where everyone just cheats and like, like it just doesn't work. And like, I know for my biochem exam, I was really mad about that. But anyways, you should try to get over it. I mean, I'm never going to get over my biochem exam, but I'm really trying. You have to forgive and let go, or else it's going to be something it's just unimportant. You know what I mean? Like in the greater scheme of things, who's going to come in and ask you what you got for one exam? Oh, like, I don't know, Dr. Asefzadeh, what did you get for your biochem exam? No one's going to come ask you that. No one's even going to come ask you what your undergrad grade was. It only matters to get into the graduate school, the master's, whatever you're trying to get into. Otherwise, no one cares.
Exactly. And if they do, that they might not have their head. They don't have a good head on their shoulders.
They probably haven't gotten over their biochemistry exam mark yet. That's why they're asking you. But yeah. So I think that was the end of our presentation. Thank you guys for coming, and I hope you guys appreciated this information and you got something out of it. I wish you guys all luck on your exams and your future endeavors and everything. Please wish that luck back upon me. Keep me in your prayers for exams. And yeah,
Exactly.
have a good night. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, have a good night. And don't worry, it's gonna go fine. It'll just pass. It's gonna end in like a month. And you'll forget about it once it's done. And then the grades come out, you'll forget. And it's
Hopefully
gonna
you
go
do
well.
amazing.
Yeah.
Study hard. Yeah.
Study hard, keep with the tips, get the good grade, and then that's it. Get
Please
ready for the
ask us
next one.
any questions you have on our Instagram or on our email, and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah.
And yeah, have a good night.
Have a great night.